Another huge year for Irish rugby, finishing the year ranked second in the world. Another Six Nations title under their belt, a drawn series in South Africa, which if you ask me, is a one series for the away team. Some newcomers at international level given the opportunity and taken it with both hands. If you had to rate Ireland's 2024 season out of 10, what would you give it? As always, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of Ireland's season this year. Who was your MVP? Who played well? Who didn't? What were the positives? What were the negatives? What did you think of the coach? Where could they have done better? Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get into it. So some of the numbers: played 11, won 8, lost 3. Massive expectations coming out of Ireland as they've been one of the most dominant rugby nations in recent years. After being knocked out of the Rugby World Cup quarterfinal, they wanted to start this year with an absolute bang. And they did. Some dominant performances in the Six Nations, beating everyone except that last game versus England, a slip-up. That game cancelling out a Grand Slam, but the Six Nations was retained. How good would a Grand Slam have been? A perfect way to start the season off, or the year off the back of the disappointing quarterfinal exit in the Rugby World Cup. Then came the most anticipated test series in rugby in a very long time. Ireland versus the Springboks in South Africa. Oh man, did these games live up to it? First game, nail biter, South Africa win it. Second game, absolute nail biter, and Ireland win it. Kieran Frawley comes on, slots a late drop goal to win it, to draw the series. The world, rugby, Irish and South African fans deserved a third test. Whoever works in World Rugby and you're watching this, why was there only 2 tests? That makes no sense to me. I called it in the preview going into that test series. It was the chances of it being a drawn series was very, very high. It's number 1 and 2 going at it. Yes, it was going to happen, and it did happen. We wanted it. It's still, who's the best? Yes, South Africa at the moment, Springboks are number 1 in the world on paper. But the only way you can settle it is when 1 and 2 go against each other and more than 2 tests. Anyway, but it was a huge test series that was. It was great to watch, and Paul Lee didn't live up to the hype. Autumn Nation series started off with a loss to the All Blacks, but what a test match! What a test match that was. Again, a lot of build-up to it. Rieko Ioane, Johnny Sexton's book that came out, things that were said in the Rugby World Cup, lots of hype leading up to it. Yes, Ireland coming off the back of a long break between drinks, if we could say so. Yes, the guys were playing URC rugby, but come off a big international break where All Blacks are straight off the bat of Rugby Championship. And yes, cohesion probably being the biggest, if you had to nitpick that Irish performance versus the All Blacks, cohesion was probably the biggest problem there. And you could definitely see that. A narrow win thereafter over Los Pumas. A 50-point thumping over Fiji, and then a very narrow win over the Wallabies as well. 2 players that stood out for me throughout this Autumn Nations Test series, and more predominantly stood out to me in the Fiji game. The next generation, if you will. The guys that were given, the small number of guys that were given opportunity that really took it with 2 hands. Sam Prendergast and Gus McCarthy. Quality players, youngsters coming through. They've been in the system, Irish system, coming through and grabbing opportunities with both hands. The future of Irish rugby. Should more guys have been given an opportunity? we'll definitely get into that. Andy Farrell, who will coach the British and Irish Lions next year, touring Australia, did not make much inroads this year with regards to bringing in that next flock of players or that next generation of Irish players. Something I felt and something I think Irish fans felt as well. While you want to be winning games right now, you have to think of what's next or what's over the bridge, what's over the road, what's behind that door. If I'm not mistaken, Gus McCarthy, Sam Prendergast, Izukchukwu, was that it? Was there other guys that made their debut? I'm not sure. There might have been one more off the bench, front row, or in the forwards that I might be missing, and I probably should have done a little bit more deeper research on. But when you're looking forward, you want to be, and I'm not saying just throwing out international caps haphazardly. There's definitely guys that could have been given opportunity over certain guys that aren't going to be around for much longer. And that's my biggest work on or negative, if you want to call it that, going forward. Holding on to certain aged players who definitely won't be around for the next Rugby World Cup. This is probably my biggest concern or work on for the upcoming year. Bleeding that next generation, getting that next generation involved, seeing what it takes to play at that international level or to compete against the best in the world as well. Like I said, you want to be winning games now, but you've got to be looking forward. And that's probably my biggest work on for Ireland. What we've learned, / the positives, certain games this year where Ireland played well under their best and still won. Winning ugly is a skill. You can't be on song every single game, but being able to win those games that you don't play well in, that's a sign of a really good, strong squad or strong. You're doing something right. And that's probably my biggest positive for this Irish side. Playing poorly in some games, but still finding ways to win. Looking forward, going for that back-to-back Six Nations title. When they kick off their first game versus England the 1st of February in 2025. And I can't wait for the Six Nations campaign. Ireland will be up for it. The resurgence or surgence of Scottish rugby is going to be up for it. England will be chomping at the bit for it. France have a formidable squad as well. Can't rule the Italians out. And while all these teams will be chomping at the bit, so will Ireland. How will Ireland and the squad react around a new coach while Andy Farrell moves on to look after the British and Irish Lions? How will that impact the squad? When will that happen? Can we see lots of changes? Can we see the changing of the guard then? Letting the older players go, in a sense, and bringing in that next generation. Because if you look at the squad, the core group of that squad is at a great age. Guys like Caelan Doris, Josh Van der Fleer, Crowley, Joe McCarthy, these guys are all that 26, 27, maybe even a little bit younger, perfect age to take on that next generation of players to the 2027 Rugby World Cup. And that has to be something, that has to be Ireland's North Star, where they've competed so well in every other competition that they're in, or any other test series or any other opponent they come up against. It's the bogey of the Rugby World Cup. And that's something that I feel like they really have to focus on during the non-World Cup years. So those 4-year cycles, they have to look forward to that next World Cup. And what do we have to do differently to be better prepared for that Rugby World Cup? And when the going gets tough, we get going. My MVP for Ireland this year, 2024 season, Joe McCarthy, Mr. Reliable, Mr. Workhorse, Mr. Enforcer. Love everything that he's about. That hard-nosed, tough Irish forward, bringing on that next generation of Irish forward, and I love everything he's about. Fantastic player, good both sides of the ball, physical, big body, and just love what he's done for Ireland this year, how consistent he's been as well. One of two players who has started every test match for Ireland, been unreal. Joe McCarthy. What would I rate Ireland out of 10 this year? It's a tough one. I'm going to go 7 out of 10, mainly because of the room for improvement. Last 3 games, they could have easily won and probably should have won, but it's been a huge season. I feel like the 2 games, or the All Blacks game they lost, they just looked out on their feet, not giving up any excuses. But it looked like a long season. And another reason why I'm only giving them a 7 is I don't think they've prepared enough to go forward, in the sense of bringing younger players through, or players worthy of Irish caps through. That's what I think. What do you think? I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments. Irish fans, is that a fair assessment? Do I know anything about Irish rugby? Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. Bye.